Eina mana, eina reo, eira rangatira ma, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora koutou. I'm Sarah Young. I have the privilege of being the Dean of Science here at Waipapa Taumatarau, the University of Auckland. A really special welcome to the university to guests that have joined us, particularly to Claire's family. And I see all the kids up the back there. It's great to see you. We've been giving you big waves. It's really my pleasure to welcome you all to the inaugural professorial lecture of Professor Claire Postlethwaite. Reaching the level of professor is no mean feat. You have to be outstanding in teaching, both undergraduate and postgraduate, in research and in service. And of course, you have to have evidence of leadership and impact in those domain areas. Claire obtained her PhD in applied mathematics from the University of Cambridge and joined us here in the faculty after postdoctoral work in the USA. Her research in mathematics covers a broad range of theoretical and applied topics in dynamical systems, and she has over 100 research outputs. As such, she enjoys collaborating with ecologists, computer scientists, neuroscientists, and other mathematicians. Claire has an extensive academic history, picking up countless accolades for her work in mathematics, including the New Zealand Mathematics Society Kalman Prize for Best Paper and the JH Michell Medal for Outstanding New Researchers. She's obtained 3 Marsden's grants as sole Principal Investigator and has actually had continuous Marsden funding since 2012. Claire, I know, no mean feat, yeah. Claire has supervised a total of 12 PhD students, 6 master's students and 9 honours students. And she's also had an active role in supporting women in mathematical sciences. In this talk tonight, Claire will take you on a whirlwind tour of the world of Winnerless competition, from Pokémon to E. coli, and dice games to lizard mating strategies. Every school child has at some point used the game rock, paper, scissors as a coin-tossing mechanism and quickly learned that there's no best strategy to which you can guarantee you'll win. Claire will explain how this same interaction works in ecological settings and how it's thought to increase biodiversity. She will show how surprisingly complicated dynamics can arise from simple networks and and competition between species. And along the way, she will talk about the mathematical discovery process and coming to terms with being stuck. Thank you, everyone, for being here, and thank you to Claire. We're really looking forward to your talk, and there will be some opportunities for questions at the end.
Well, thank you very much, Sarah, for that very kind introduction. I feel with that applause, I should probably just leave now. I don't think it's going to get any better than that, honestly. All right, so thank you all very much for coming here and taking time out of your Thursday evening to be here. It's great to see so many people here. So yeah, today I'm going to tell you a little bit about my journey to being here as a professor at Auckland, and I'm going to mostly be telling you about the research I do, and in particular why I think the research that I do is fun. So I hope that that's one thing you get away from today's lecture, is that a lot of the stuff I'm telling you about is actually really fun. And the other thing I'm going to tell you about, as Sarah just mentioned, is about the mathematical discovery process and how it's okay to be stuck. All right, so I grew up in the southeast of England, somewhere here. This is southeast of England. London is here, and I grew up sort of here. And if I'd turned out to be a geology professor, I could probably tell you a bit more about this geology map than that this is just a big lump of chalk. And I might have photographs of myself scrabbling around in rocks and stuff like that. If I'd turned out to be a biology professor, I could probably find photographs of myself, I don't know, playing with animals or something like that. I spent a long time at my dad's house last year looking for photographs of me doing mathematics. Turns out it's not that photogenic, and this part would have actually been a lot easier if I'd been a music professor. So for my music friends in the audience, this is me playing the cello, aged 5. It turns out my parents took a lot more photos of me playing the cello than doing maths. So despite the amount of time I spent playing a cello as a child, it would come as no surprise to anybody who knew me at this age or as a teenager that I ended up as a maths professor. I was a maths geek from the very beginning. I was a completionist in everything. I was very competitive. And I really liked doing exams. And when you're a maths geek and you like doing exams, then it turns out that there's lots of maths competitions that you can do. Mathematicians like doing competitions. And so in lieu of photographs of me doing maths, I have newspaper clippings to delight you all with the journalistic prowess of the Tunbridge and Morning Courier, close rival to the New Zealand Herald in terms of editorial advice. Anyway, so we have Maths Whiz Claire in Oxford Challenge. That was from when I was about 15 or something. So I did some maths competition and went off to some Oxford thing. This one's great. Claire's Sum Total. Great headline. And you'll notice that they spelt my name wrong here and here. But they got it right down here. So excellent sub-editing. And then you like my 80s, 90s haircut as well. Traffic jams and teenage tension. Another fantastic headline. So this is a picture of, this is me down here, and there's a group of us when we got our A-level results, which if you don't know the UK school system, this is the last exam you do before you go off to university, and the UK newspapers they really like to talk about the exam results a lot. So Simon Piper goes back to school on the day A-level results are published. Anyway, so they talk to all of us, and there's this little quote about me, which says, she hopes to go to Cambridge University and later work in the Met Office in the field of mathematical research, but stressed not as a weather girl. Okay. Anyway, so that's my teenage years summed up. Anyway, so I did go to Cambridge. This is a picture of Trinity College, where I was a student. And when I started, I did actually think that I did want to go into research about weather systems and climate, but two things happened. The first one was that I took a course called Environmental Fluid Dynamics, and I really didn't like it. It turned out it really, really wasn't my thing. And then the second thing that happened was that I applied for a summer job at the Met Office, which is, the Met Office is called the Met Office here as well, I think. And I didn't get it. So I was kind of annoyed. And so this leads me to the first person I'm going to thank for sort of being a mentor on my journey today, which is Professor Mike Proctor. So he was my director of studies when I was an undergraduate at Cambridge. And after I'd got this rejection, I was complaining to him, and I said, I got turned down from this application that I made for the Met Office, and I don't have a job for the summer, I don't know what I'm going to do. And he said, well, you can always just come and work for me. And so I did. So I did, we have them here, equivalent of a summer research project after my third year undergraduate. And that was really, that was my introduction to doing mathematical research, and that kind of set my path for the rest of my academic journey. Mike was, is a wonderful person. He's still around, and he was a great support to me as an undergraduate and also through my PhD. All right, so then I did my PhD at the University of Cambridge, and honestly, the rest of my academic journey to here is not particularly exciting, so I'm not going to talk about that very much. I did a couple of postdocs in the US, and then I moved here as a lecturer in 2008, and honestly, a sort of fairly bog standard academic journey. So that's pretty much all I'm going to say about history, as it were. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the sort of maths that I do, which was the sort of maths that Mike did, which is called dynamical systems. So the branch of maths I do is called dynamical systems, and this is the study of things which change with time, which seems exceptionally broad, right? This sort of everything, pretty much everything changes with time. And dynamical systems is, in some sense, about looking at maybe minimal models or idyllic mathematical models that we can look at and make predictions about how things change with time. And if you're kind of like, well, what do you mean by things that change with time? Here's an example just to think about for this particular slide, which is, let's think of the thing that changes with time being the number of people infected with COVID in New Zealand. Okay? This is a quantity which could be measured, and it changes with time. As time goes forwards, this thing changes. And so the study of dynamical systems, we care about things sort of in a particular way. And one of the things we care about is the qualitative behavior of this thing that's changing with time in the long term. So by qualitative behavior, I mean, well, sort of what's happening to it that you can kind of describe with words. So is this number, I'm going to go this way because time is increasing that way. Is this number, as time goes forwards, is it settling down to an equilibrium? Okay, it just sort of settles off and then doesn't change anymore. Does it have oscillations? Does it go up and down like this? Does it do something more complicated than that? So many of you will have heard of the idea of chaos theory. This is a particular branch of dynamical systems, and chaotic solutions look very complicated. So maybe this thing that's changing is going to do something really complicated. So that's what I mean by qualitative behavior. It's kind of just the thing you can describe in words rather than precisely what is the number of COVID cases at this particular time. And I care about what happens in the long term. I'm not very good at pointing this pointer. So I don't really care so much about how we get there. So if it's going to go to equilibrium, I don't care how we get to the equilibrium, just that we get there in the end. Okay? I want to understand the stability of these different behaviors that I'm getting. And by that I mean that if you've got some particular behavior, like you're sitting at equilibrium, if you poke it in some way, if you perturb the system, then what happens? Do you go back to that same thing that you were at, or do you go somewhere else? So for example, in terms of COVID cases, we all know from experience that if you have 0 COVID cases in the country, then you can be at equilibrium, right? There are no more COVID cases, okay? You're sitting there, you're at equilibrium, you're at 0 for a long time. But we also know that this is unstable because if you introduce a small perturbation, for example, if several people come from Australia with COVID and land in your country, there's a small perturbation, then you are no longer at 0 anymore, okay? The number of cases can grow very rapidly. So that we call an unstable solution. Okay? If it was the case that, you know, you had that small perturbation and the numbers went back down again, we'd call that stable. Okay? And then the last thing I care about is how the behavior or the stability, so those two things that I'm interested in there, how they change as we change parameters of the system. Okay? So the parameters you can think of as numbers which are somehow involved in how this thing evolves, but will remain fixed over the course of your experiment or the thing that you're looking at. But you might be able to change them later. So for example, for the COVID thing, a parameter might be, well, what's the infectiousness of this disease? For this disease, it could be something. For a different disease, it might be a different number. Okay? Or for example, what's the proportion of people that are vaccinated? Right now, it's this number. If it's something different, then we might be able to change the behavior, right? If you increase the number of vaccinations, you might be able to make that 0 solution stable again. Okay, that's the most technical slide. So you got through that, so you can pay attention again now. Okay, so I'm going to now next talk about some sort of more slightly mathy things related to the types of things that I'm interested in. And then we're going to take a dynamical systems viewpoint on them. Okay? And the first thing I'm going to talk about is relationships. So relationships in mathematics crop up all the time. You have two mathematical objects and you have some relationship between them. This just means sort of some sort of property that holds between the two objects. And if you read my abstract, which you probably didn't, but if you did, you will have noticed that I'm interested in a thing called intransitive relationships. Okay? And in order to talk about intransitive, which means non-transitive relationships, first I'm going to tell you about transitive relationships. Okay, so we're going to introduce some mathematical objects. This is my mother. Okay, photo taken on her 70th birthday. And there's a relationship between my mother and me. That's a photo of me taken on my 42nd birthday. And my mother is older than me. Okay, that's the relationship. My mother is older than me. Are you ready? Okay. And I am older than Alice. And that's Alice on her 10th birthday. Okay? Now, because is older than is a transitive relationship, I can essentially, when I've got three things on a line, I can take out the middle one and say this means that my mother is older than Alice. Okay? So that's an example of a transitive relationship. But not all relationships have this property, okay? So for example, if I replace is older than with is mother of, then my mother is mother of me, I am mother of Alice, but that does not mean that my mother is mother of Alice, okay? So this is a non-transitive relationship, and there are many examples also of or non-transitive or intransitive relationships in mathematics. And these are the sorts of relationships that I'm particularly interested in. So a famous intransitive relationship comes out in the game of rock, paper, scissors. So this is a game where two players are playing, and each of them makes some hand signal, either a rock, paper, or scissors. And depending on what the two players do, then someone wins, okay? And you win like this. So scissors beats paper, paper beats rock. Now, if this was a transitive relationship, you'd be able to take these two, the scissors beats paper and paper beats rock, and say, oh, well, that means that scissors beats rock, okay? But it doesn't, okay? We know that in this game, rock beats scissors, okay? And so this is an intransitive relationship between these three strategies, if you like, of a game. Okay, so what I'm gonna do for the rest of this little section is I'm gonna talk about a lot of examples of rock, paper, scissors type dynamics. But first, I just wanna have a word about arrows. Okay, so there's lots of arrows in these diagrams. And you'll see in this picture, which I ruthlessly stole off of the internet, the arrows point from the winner to the loser. Right? Scissors beats paper. And I've done this experiment in a lecture, and actually if you ask people to draw the arrows, this is what they draw. If you say draw the arrows. I do not like this, okay? So I'm going to change the direction of the arrows. Right, so my arrow is going to go this way. And you'll see why this makes more sense to me. But in all of my diagrams, from now on, the arrows point towards the winner. Okay, so I haven't changed any of the words, I just changed the direction of the arrows. So scissors beats paper, and the arrow goes towards the scissors. Okay, so I like board games. And one of the things that I think is really nice about these modern board games, as they get called, is that there's lots of different strategies that you can play, and there's not one strategy that always wins. Right? And the reason for this is because that would be boring as a game. If there was one strategy that would always win, then everyone would always play that strategy, and the rest of the game would be kind of pointless. So one of the nice things about lots of games is it kind of leaves you to discover this. You play different strategies, and you find out, well, I won when this person played this other, but it's sort of, you can get these kind of intransitive relationships that it depends what strategies other players play. And so in some games, this is sort of left for you to discover. In other games, it's built in. Okay, so I'm going to give this my first example. Who here has played the card game Pokémon? Oh, more than I expected, actually, but definitely in the younger half of the crowd. So I'm going to put the document camera up. So in the card game Pokémon, oops, I'm afraid I've broken the lecture theatre. Okay. In the card game Pokémon, you are playing these cards, these little creatures, and there's two players, and the idea is that you're playing your cards and you want to beat the opponent. Okay. Now underneath here, there's these sort of actions that you can take, but every Pokémon has a type. Okay, so this Pokémon, oh, where's my finger, is of water type, and that's indicated by that little water symbol down there. Okay, but down here, in very small writing, it says weaknesses. And it's got this leaf symbol, which I've learnt is grass, grass times 2. And what that means is that if you are attacked by a grass-type Pokemon, then it does double the damage of what it would have done to another type of Pokemon. Okay, so I found a picture which tells you how all the different types of Pokemon interact with each other. And so this has got all the different types here of the attacker and the defender. And if it's green, that means it sort of gets a bonus from attacking that type. And if we zoom in the top left, then you can see that if you ignore the normal, you can see that the water type, the water type, if it attacks fire, it gets a double bonus. If fire attacks grass, it gets a double bonus. And if grass attacks water, it gets a double bonus. And so there is your rock, paper, scissors mechanism sort of built into this game, which presumably makes the game more interesting and means that they sell more cards, I guess. Okay, so that's my first example. My next one is a fun game to play at the pub. And this is where you come in, Sarah. So I've got 3 dice, and the game is we each roll 1 dice, and we see who rolls higher. Okay? And because you're new at this, you can pick which dice you want.
Oh, it doesn't really matter.
Okay. So Sarah has picked the purple, and so I'm going to choose the yellow dice. Okay. And then we roll, and we see. Oh no.
What is it? I got a 6.
Oh well, I got a 3, so you won that time. So Sarah got lucky. We won't do it again. But if we had done this 10 times, then you would expect the yellow dice, in fact, to beat the purple dice. Okay? And so I'm not going to do the probabilities, but if you know a little bit about probability, you can check. But actually, the yellow dice wins at this game against the purple one, the green dice wins against the yellow one, and the purple dice will win against the green one. So that's a fun game to play at the pub. And then my third demonstration is this contraption, which I have to thank Hinker for lending me because I broke mine yesterday. There we go. Okay. So what this is a set of 3 dials which have cogs on the inside. So if I turn it sideways, you can see there are various cogs. And if I rotate the blue one, that way, then you can see that the red one is going faster than the blue one, and the green one is going slower. Okay, so red is going faster than blue, and green is going slower. And so if you sort of picture the way in which the cogs have to be arranged with the gears and stuff so that happens, you can think about that. But now, if I rotate the green one, so we know that the blue one is going faster than the green one. Green one's going slower, and the red one's going faster than the blue one. When I rotate the green one, the blue one is still going faster than the green one, which is what you would expect. But the red one is no longer going faster than the blue one. It's actually going slower than all of them. And so there's a clever mechanism inside which is sort of doing this non-transitive behavior between the way the gears work out. And normally I hand this around for people to look at, but as I said, my one is broken, and I don't know how it got broken. So if you want to look at it, you're very welcome to come and look at the end. Okay, so those are some kind of games, if you like, and you see how these non-transitive relationships appear in toys and games. But they actually appear in ecology a lot as well. So here's an example from the bacteria E. coli. So consider a situation where we've got 3 different strains of the bacteria E. coli. The first one does essentially nothing. It's just regular E. coli. The second one produces a toxin which kills the first one, but the second one is immune to the toxin that it produces. So if you had just types 1 and 2, then type 2 will win. Right? All of type 1 is going to die off because of this toxin, and only type 2 will be left because it's immune to the toxin that it's producing. But let's suppose that producing this toxin has some energetic cost to the bacteria. then if we introduce a third type, which is also immune to the toxin but doesn't bother to produce it, then if we only had type 2 and 3, then type 3 is going to win, because neither of them are going to die from the toxin. Type 3 is like, well, and the type 2 is producing the toxin, and type 3 is like, well, what's the point? Why are you bothering to produce that toxin? It's not doing anything to me. You're wasting all that energy producing it. And so type 3 can spend more time making more E. coli babies, or whatever it does. So type 3 is then going to win, okay, against type 2. But then also, okay, so type 3 wins against type 2, but let's also suppose that somehow being immune to the toxin also has some energetic cost. Then if you only had type 3 and type 1, when there's no toxin being produced at all, then type 1 does nothing, and type 3 is sitting around sort of wasting energy being immune to the toxin. And so type 1 is going to have more time to have E. coli babies, right? So there's going to be more type 1. Okay, so again, you've got this rock, paper, scissors type dynamics between these three types of bacteria. And in fact, this type of relationship occurs in a whole wide range of different animals. These are the lizards that were mentioned by Sarah. I'm not actually going to tell you about them because I decided the E. coli example was better. But you can ask me about them later. So there's a bunch of lizards that do this rock, paper, scissors thing, and all these other types of organisms also have been observed to have these sort of intransitive relationships. And so ecologists actually really like this. There was a special issue in the Journal of Ecology in 2018 with an editorial entitled "Everything You Always Wanted to Know About Intransitive Competition But Were Afraid to Ask." So ecologists really like this, which is nice. Okay, so now I'm going to think about this from my dynamical systems point of view. So remember, I'm interested in how do my things that change with time, okay? And in this example, if we go back to the E. coli, the things that change with time in this case are, if you like, the population of each of these three different strains, okay? So what things might happen? The first thing that might happen is that you might only have one type of E. coli, okay? Which is like everyone's playing rock and every game ends in a tie. Okay, so there's only one type of E. coli, and everything just sits at equilibrium, okay? Nothing interesting happens. But we know now that if we've got that equilibrium, if we introduce a small amount of type 2, then that type 2 is going to dominate, type 1 will die, and so you'll get a switching from type 1 to type 2. That equilibrium of type 1 is unstable, in the words I used before. And what you see is something like this. Okay, so this is a graph, this is time going this way, and this is, if you like, density or population in some arbitrary units of these three types, 1, 2, and 3. We start near type 1, being lots of type 1 and not very much of the others. Type 2 grows, type 1 dies, and then we see type 3, and then when we just got type 3, the type 1s can come back. And so it goes round and round and round. Okay, you see these three different types in oscillation. And this time series is representative of an object that in dynamical systems we call a heteroclinic cycle. Okay? And I'm going to represent this cycle by a picture like this. So I've got three types, 1, 2, and 3. And remember, my arrows point towards the winner of each competition. And you can see now why I've done that. Because the way I go around this cycle is in the direction of the winner. First I have 1, then I have 2, then I have 3. And that's the way that we go around the cycle. So this has all been background so far. So a lot of this stuff has been known for a long time. So what I'm going to spend the rest of today doing is I'm going to talk about two extensions of this as the things that I've worked on. Because there's not too much that can happen when you just go round and round, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So the first extension I'm going to talk about is what happens when you add space into this system, and I'll explain what I mean by space in just a second. And the second extension I'm going to do is what happens when you add more species. Okay, so rather than just having 3, you've got many species. Okay, so what do I mean by space? So you can think again about this Petri dish that I've got of my E. coli. And I want you to think of this picture as like a bird's eye view of this E. coli dish. And each of these little blobs is one of those E. coli. I'm a mathematician, so I mean, these are bacteria. And the 3 different types of rock, paper, and scissors are indicated here. Okay, and let's assume they can move, but they don't really move very fast. What I'm more interested in is the interactions. And so let's say they can only interact with the ones that are close to them. So if this scissors here interacts with that paper there, then the scissors will win, and the paper dies, and then there's space for the scissors to have E. coli babies in its place. And so, okay, and so if we let this happen continuously, then what's going to happen? Yeah, everyone does this. Amazing. Okay, so I can go back to this one. I have a video. So this is, again, an idealized mathematical model of what's going on. But if we start, okay, so I've started kind of with a big clump of blue here, green there, and red. And when I let it go, you'll see, actually, if I go back here, you can see the arrows, okay? So the blue should be invaded by the red, right? The red can beat the blues, the green will beat the reds, and etc. So this is what you see happen. And so the big patches, you get that sort of invasion, but near the center, you end up getting a spiral. I'll play it again. If I do that, will it play it again? Yep. Play it again. You end up getting a spiral. And this is a short simulation. If you let it go for much longer, then you end up with these really big cycles that just sort of sit there and spiral around. And these ones were started with these very special initial conditions, right? Big block of red, big block of blue, etc. If I start with just sort of random initial conditions, so think of this as a small number of all 3 types of species scattered randomly around my space, then what you see are, it kind of does some stuff, and then you get these little spirals everywhere. So this is all kind of neat. And the sorts of, I've worked on these spirals and these waves with some people that I'll mention a bit more about later. And we've looked at calculating things like the wave speed of these spirals, the wavelength, the dispersion relationship, which is the relationship between the two, and then again the stability of these sorts of solutions. Okay, so that was a very brief thing about space, and I only really put that in so I could show you those cool videos. Most of the time, I'm going to talk about what happens when you've got more than 1 species, or more than 3 species, sorry. Okay, and this is the topic that I studied in my PhD. And so these are called heteroclinic networks, right? We had a heteroclinic cycle, and I've got a network because I've got multiple different equilibria, different species, more different species. And so I started looking at these objects when I was a PhD student, which was in 2002. And these 2 papers here were the first 2 papers that I read in my PhD. And I read them very, very carefully, as you do when you're at the beginning of your PhD. And when you're reading papers, you feel kind of in awe of the authors. You're like, oh, these people are amazing. And it has been my absolute pleasure to actually get to know and work with all 4 of these people. And some of you will have hopefully, if you're looking at the side, noticed by now, one of the names here is Vivian, who is sitting in the audience. So if you don't recognize her, that's her just there. So Vivian has been an amazing mentor to me ever since I arrived in Auckland, and actually even before then. And I feel very privileged to have got to know her over the last almost 20 years. And she's just been, yes, very helpful in my career, and also very protective of me when I was a beginning lecturer here. So I do just want to say a very big thank you to Vivian for all of the help you've given me through my career. Mary was my postdoctoral supervisor when I went to Chicago, so it's been great working with her. And this paper is by two people, Pete Ashwin and Michael Field. I couldn't find a picture of Mike Field anywhere on the internet, so I've replaced him by a picture of his book. It's a very good book called Symmetry and Chaos. I'm going to talk a little bit about Pete in a minute, but I do want to say something about the special role that Mike Field has played in my career. So early on in my career, somebody, and I wish I could remember who it was, but they said to me that it was really important to have somebody, sort of a fairly senior figure in your field, who you knew well, who knew your work, and who you got on with, and who you knew liked you, and then to never collaborate with them. And the reason for this is then you can ask them to write all your reference letters. And so Mike Field has played this role for me, and so he has written me many reference letters for many well, I assume he has. I've asked him to, and he said he would, so I assume that he actually did. Obviously, I never saw them. So thank you to Mike, even though we can't see your picture, for your help in my career. All right, so heterokinetic networks, let's have a look at them. So this is the network that was first studied by Vivian and Mary back in 1994. So what they did was they took this cycle that we looked at before, the 1, 2, 3 cycle, and they basically just stuck two of them together. And then you can ask the question, well, what happens if you're near this, if you've got lots of species 1, then you would expect that the next thing you got was lots of species 2. But what happens after that? Are you going to get lots of species 3, or will you get lots of species 4? Maybe you might get both. Okay? And so that's the sort of question that they were interested in. And then following on from that, well, what happens? Suppose you get lots of species 3. What happens next? You keep getting lots of species 3, or could you sometimes go up here and then get species 4? So which route are you taking around this network? Okay, so I haven't talked about equations at all, really. But one thing to realize is behind all of these pictures of networks, there are actually a whole bunch of mathematical equations. And one of the pieces of work that I did with Pete Ashwin, so him and I, that's the other person in the previous slide that I said I would talk about. Him and I have been working together for a little over 10 years now. And one of the things we did was looking at, well, if you draw any network you like, so just draw some dots and some arrows, can you write down some equations which contain that network? And the answer is mostly, most of the time, obviously. But this has been really important because this has allowed us to be able to study lots of different networks, okay? Rather than saying, oh, well, we found this system that has this network, we're able to say, what if we wanted this network? What would the system be that would have that in it? And so this has sort of opened up the field of sort of being able to examine these networks quite a lot. Okay, and then as I mentioned before, these are the sorts of questions that we ask about heterokinetic networks. In particular, which route do we take when we're going around? Okay, so in the last part of this talk, I've got to change over again because I'm going to show you another video. I'm going to talk about one particular network and just some results that I got from it, which I'm quite proud of. I like these results. And also to tell a story, as I said, about mathematical discovery and how you find out new mathematical results. Mathematics doesn't just sort of appear on your desk. The way in which you find it can be quite time-consuming or can take a lot of time. And I want to talk about how it's okay to be stuck on things. Yes. Okay. This is the network I'm going to talk about. It's called the rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock network. And if you don't know about it already, then I'm going to let, where are we, Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory tell you all about it. And hopefully the sound works.
I'll tell you what, how about we go rock, paper, scissors?
Well, I don't think so. No. Anecdotal evidence suggests that in a game of rock, paper, scissors, players familiar with each other will tie 75 to 80% of the time due to the limited number of outcomes. I suggest rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock.
What?
It's very simple. But scissors cuts paper, paper covers rock, rock crushes lizard, lizard poisons Spock. Spock smashes scissors, scissors decapitates lizard, lizard eats paper, paper disproves Spock, Spock vaporizes rock, and as it always has, rock crushes scissors.
Okay, I think I got it.
Rock, paper, scissors, Linda, Spock.
All right. So, I won't make you play this one, Sarah. Okay, but I do actually have a set of dice that do these relationships, but we won't do this one. But the thing to notice is that now we've got 5 strategies that you can play, and each of them is beaten by 2 of the strategies and will win against 2 of the strategies. Okay? So I have dice, but I also have I have to change this again. I have another thing that I want to demonstrate, which I forgot to mention before, that the gears were made for me by the Dutch toy puzzle maker, Oscar van Deventer, and he also made me these scales, which I hope you can see. I'll hold them up. So basically, there's something behind which you can come and look at later, but I'm not going to show you so you don't figure out how it works. But there's a bunch of pans, and you can press on them, so and they're different colours. And then I have 2 quite heavy weights. Okay. Now these 2 are actually the same weight. When I put them on the pan, so I want to show it to you like this because it's difficult to see if you can't see them horizontally. So when I put it on the pan, it goes down. And if I put another one on, then it also goes down, but they go down by different amounts. Okay, so you can see that the one on the yellow pan is down further than the one on the orange pan. Okay, so if we say, well, going down further means you've won, okay, then yellow has beaten orange, and red will beat yellow, and orange will beat red. So that's like a little rock, paper, scissors. But actually, we've got 5 pans. So here, orange beats red, yellow beats orange, green beats yellow, blue beats green, and red will beat blue. So that's one of my cycles of 5, if you like. There's another cycle of 5, and there's a bunch more cycles of 3. But what this does is the mechanism behind it, and you can ponder on how that works throughout the rest of the talk. It has the exact same relationships as that of rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock. And so this was, as I said, I commissioned it, and it was made for me by Oscar van Deventer, and I'm very grateful to him for doing that. Okay, and so here's my network that I'm looking at, and what I'm interested to know is which way round this network do I go? Okay, so if I'm here, am I going to follow this arrow? When I get to here, am I going to go that way or that way? And then which way am I going to go? Okay, I'm going to make one simplification, which is I'm going to say that all the dots are basically the same. Okay, so I'm just going to color those black and say that they're all symmetric with each other, but it doesn't make any difference which one you're at. Things locally look the same. But I'm going to distinguish the edges, okay, the arrows. So I'm going to have 2 different types of arrows. I'm going to have yellow arrows, or amber, as my student David likes to call them, which are these ones going around the outside, and then blue arrows, which are these ones here. And so you might say, well, there's some different routes you can take. We can just take the amber ones, and we go around the outside. You just take the blue ones, you go around here. You might take these 3, 2 ambers and 1 blue, and that gives you the little rock, paper, scissors triangle. And there's some other routes. But you could, there are infinitely many different routes, right? Everywhere you get to, you've got a choice of 2. Okay, so everywhere you get to, there's a choice of 2. So you could write down essentially any sequence of the letters A's and B's, and that gives you some route that you're going around the network, and it's just going to go on forever and ever. And so I want to know, well, which of these routes am I going to take? So I started working on this problem with Alistair Ruckledge, who's a long-time collaborator of mine now. He's at the University of Leeds, and we started working on this in 2012. So I found, it seems like I kept quite good records. So I found these notes from a visit to Leeds in May, June 2012, it says. And we did some stuff, but we didn't really know what we were doing, and it didn't really work out. And when I got back, I did a bit more stuff. And then I found this note which says, stability conditions are more complicated than we first thought. So we didn't really know what we were doing. And then I didn't do anything for a while. And I was looking at the notes. I was like, why did I not do anything? Okay, so this was November 2012. So why didn't I do anything for a while? Well, this happened. And the caption, by the way, applies to the baby just as much as it does to the maths. So anyway, so I didn't work on this problem for a number of years. But in the back of my head, it's clear to me that there was something interesting that was happening. And the next reference I can find in my notes is dated the 6th of March 2020. Now, I don't know why I thought March 2020 was a good time to embark on a new project, but for some reason I did. And so what I'm just going to show you is a bunch of the pages of my notebook of when I was working on this problem. And the reason for this is to show you how much wrong stuff I did before I got to the right answer. And the thing I want to make clear is that sort of all of this time I was in a sense stuck. And I think actually being stuck is the default position of a mathematician. Because if you're not stuck, well then you just do it, and then you've got the answer, and you're done. My mum was visiting last year, and she was asking me how things were going at one point. I was like, I'm a bit stuck on this problem I'm working on. And she said, how can you be stuck? You're really good at maths. And so I had to explain this to her. Well, being stuck is kind of what you do, otherwise you just do it. So anyway, so these are my notes. So it just kind of goes through. You'll see there's a lot of scribbling out, and there's a lot of changing color. So one of the things, I like writing colored pens, and when I want a new idea, I change color pen, because it helps me think differently. Anyway, a lot of this is wrong. This page here is all completely nonsense. Things get crossed out, scribbled out, lots of stuff. Okay. And then at this point, so this is now in May, and by the way, the children have gone back to school at this point, having not been at school for a couple of months. And I kind of got frustrated, and I've written what to do next in a box, and down here it says, what can we do here that's more than was in this paper as a paper that I'd previously written? I felt like, well, I've got something, but I don't have anything that's really new, and I was kind of getting a bit fed up. But I carried on. I do remember having the kids go back to school and coming out of lockdown. I was like, I'm going to do something that I think is really fun. I'm going to reward myself with working on this problem because I think there's something interesting in there. And then eventually, through some more pages, something did happen. And the thing this is the thing, which this will only make sense, I think, probably to David, is what it says there is, this is only the case if you've done that before. Okay, and what do I mean by that is that, remember, what I was trying to do was figure out where am I going to go when I get to here? Am I going to go that way or am I going to go that way? And it turns out that in order to figure out which way I was going to go, I had to know where I'd come from. I'm sure that there's a really good metaphor in that, which I hadn't planned on. But that was kind of the key breakthrough that I had made at that point, was sort of figuring this out. But it took me many, many, many pages of doing sums to get to that point. Okay, so then I had the answer, if you like. I knew how to do it. It still took a while to kind of churn through actually doing the calculations. But by that point, it was all working. And then I'm going to show you the results, also partial results. And this is what's going on. So I need to explain this picture, but I first want you to appreciate its beauty, because this is something that I think is really neat. So what I've got here is two different parameters. Okay, so remember that parameters are things which control something about the system. And if you like, you can think about them as something to do with the strength of the two different types of arrows. So A is to do with the yellow arrow, and B is to do with the blue arrow. And if you want, it's like, how much benefit do you get from beating that particular species? Okay, so if you're type 1, if you beat type 5, how many more E. coli babies do you get to make? Okay, and it's not necessarily the same. You've got two things that you can beat. You might sort of be better off beating one type than the other one. So that's why we've got two parameters there. And then the different colored regions tell you which route around the network you're going to make. Okay, so if I pick my parameters so that I'm in this yellow region down here, then I just do the A's. I just take the yellow connections going all the way around. If I'm in this region here, I just do the B's. Up here is an AAB, which is one of my rock, paper, scissors little triangles. But then in the middle, we find this amazing kind of array of different sausages, they sometimes get called. I think they look more like leaves. And in each one of these, you've got a different route around the network. And I have to start abbreviating things because the list of A's and B's gets very long. But for instance, this is a QTD, which is a Q, which is an ABBB, and then a T, which is an AAB, and then a D, which is a BB. And this was completely unexpected. When I started working on this, I had no idea this thing was going to come up. And there's a lot of patterns in here, and I'm just going to show you one of them. So I'm going to zoom in down here. So down here I've got this purple bit. I've got one region here which does T squared D, and one which does TD. And what we find is that between those two regions, there's another region which does the pattern, which is these two things glued together. So there's a purple region which does T squared D and then TD. And then between those two regions, there's a region which does this glued to that. Okay, I won't read it all out. Between this region and that region, there's a region which does these two things glued together. And we expect that we get infinitely many of these going down. You can continually glue the two things together and you get another leaf stuck in between. But this is something we haven't managed to prove yet. There's still an awful lot about this system that we don't know. But these results, I think, were really nice. All right, I've got a couple more minutes, so I can do my last thing, which is, OK, now I'm going to put these two things together. So I told you about extra species, and I told you about what happens if I add space. And so I will just very quickly show you what happens when you stick the two things together. We really don't know much about this system yet. So this is now, I've taken the 5D system and I've stuck it in space. And I'm going to get, there we go. OK, so this is just a simulation of what happens. And you'll see that you get spirals. And if you look at one of the centers of the spirals, you're going around spiraling around 3 species. But which species are in that spiral keeps changing. OK? So there's some really cool stuff going on here. But this is still a work in progress. This, I should say, this video was made by my PhD student, David. And there's a group of people working on this. And I'll play it for you again, so you can watch that while I do the rest of it, because it's a quite neat video. All right, so that is basically the end. I've just got a few thank yous. So I want to say thank you to all the people who have helped me on my career, many of whom I'm not able to fit on this slide. We've seen a lot of these people already, and I also want to thank these other people who I've worked with at various points and have been very influential on my career. When you're living in New Zealand and you're away from your biological family, it's really important to have an adopted family. So I also want to say thank you very much to all of these people for being the best group of friends that anyone could hope to have. And so I'm not going to name them because they all know who they are, but thank you all very much for supporting me on my journey. And then just as one final thing, so everybody knows, if you've listened to Judith Collins or if you've applied for a Marsden this year, that it's really, really important to be able to say what the economic benefits of your research are. Well, it turns out there's a pub in Wellington that has a rock, paper, scissors competition every year. And if you win, you get $1,000. So that's it all. That's all. Thank you very much.